The restaurant was alive with chatter and clinking glasses. Yet in the dimly lit corner, Detective Armand Khan felt a different pulse, one almost imperceptible, like the quiet before a storm. He had come to this place under a pretense, routine inspection, but his instincts told him there was more beneath the polished marble floors and flickering chandeliers. At the center of the room, a young waiter moved nervously between tables, balancing a tray of drinks with shaky hands. Armand's eyes followed him. The boy's uniform was impeccable, but his movements betrayed anxiety, as if he were walking on a thin line stretched across a precipice. Then it happened. A man, large and imposing, sat at a corner table, his expression unreadable. The waiter, in a moment of reckless boldness, muttered something under his breath, a comment dripping with disrespect, meant perhaps as a joke, or perhaps as a venting of exhaustion. The man's gaze, though silent, cut through the chatter like a knife. There was a stillness in the air that nobody else seemed to notice. Even the flicker of the candle on his table seemed to hesitate. The waiter froze, realizing his words had landed differently than intended. He wiped his palms on his apron, trying to regain composure, but Armand noticed it immediately. The man in the corner was no ordinary diner. There was a weight to his presence, a quiet dominance that demanded attention without a single word spoken. Armand leaned back, studying the scene. The restaurant's hum continued, oblivious to the tension crackling near the corner table. He couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was a pivot, an unseen hinge about to turn. He had been a detective long enough to sense when ordinary events concealed extraordinary truths. And this man, Big Shaq, as he would later learn, was no ordinary man. Something about him radiated control and secrecy. The waiter finally dared to glance up. His eyes met the man's, and in that brief, charged instant, Armand saw fear, not just the kind that comes from a reprimand, but a fear of power, of unknown consequences. The waiter's shoulders slumped, his nervousness palpable. He muttered an apology under his breath, hoping it had gone unnoticed. But Armand could tell it had not. Yet, amid the tension, there was a flicker of hope, strange, almost paradoxical. Armand felt it, and so did the waiter, even if he did not know why. There was something in the man's eyes, beneath the edge of intimidation, that hinted at understanding, at a measure of mercy waiting to be earned. It was a hope tempered with caution, fragile yet undeniable. The crowd continued its laughter and conversation, unaware of the drama unfolding at the corner table. Armand's mind raced. Why had this simple insult, so mundane in any other context, seemed to ripple through the room with gravity? And why did the man, Big Shaq, respond with silence rather than anger? There was calculation in that stillness, a message hidden beneath restraint. As the waiter scurried away to attend to another table, Armand's gaze remained fixed. Something told him this was only the beginning. The man in the corner, unassuming yet undeniably powerful, was connected to something larger, something that could shake foundations if discovered. And in the shadows of the restaurant, hope lingered like a whisper, a hope that even a small, fearful mistake could become a path to redemption. If navigated wisely, Armand scribbled a note in his pad. Observe, wait, discover. He knew the next move would reveal everything or nothing. Either way, the night promised revelations. And somewhere hidden behind polite smiles and clinking glasses, the first piece of a puzzle was already in motion. The restaurant was silent now, except for the faint hum of the refrigerators in the kitchen and the soft ticking of a clock somewhere behind a wall. Detective Armand Khan had returned alone long after closing hours, under the guise of checking inventory records. But his true purpose was far from mundane. He needed answers. The incident with the waiter had left a mark on his instincts, and his gut whispered that the corner table man, Big Shaq, was far more than he appeared. Armand was led to a small office by Shaq himself. The man's expression calm, almost regal. The room smelled faintly of aged wood and leather, and dust motes floated lazily in the dim light that filtered through half-drawn blinds. Rows of photographs lined the walls, each one telling fragments of a story that Armand had yet to piece together. It was in the corner, partially hidden behind a stack of ledgers, that his eyes landed on a particular photograph that made his pulse quicken. The image was old. It's black and white, worn at the edges. It depicted a young waiter standing next to a man who bore an uncanny resemblance to Big Shaq, though decades younger. Both men were smiling, their hands clasped in a formal handshake. And something about the scene felt deliberate, almost ceremonial. Scribbled faintly at the bottom of the photograph were the words, "Never forget respect." The smallest insult can cost the biggest. Armin's fingers itched to touch it. The message seemed more than a warning, it was a key, a code, a silent echo of an event so significant it had endured decades. He could feel it in his chest, the kind of pulse that comes when you're standing on the threshold of revelation. His mind raced. The waiter's careless words had not just brushed against a man, they had disturbed a hidden legacy. Shaq watched him closely. His calm aura unchanged, yet Armand sensed the faintest flicker of tension behind the eyes. "Interesting photograph, isn't it?" Shaq's voice was smooth, almost conversational, but there was weight to it. Like a boulder resting beneath the surface of a calm river, some memories demand attention. Armand nodded subtly, careful not to betray the swirl of thoughts inside him. He noticed a small, barely visible outline behind the waiter in the photographer's shape that didn't belong. It was rectangular, embedded in the wall, almost invisible, but its shadow hinted at a hidden safe. Something told him it wasn't a coincidence. The safe, the photograph, the cryptic message, they were all connected. Hope fluttered faintly in Armand's chest. If he could decipher the meaning of this photograph, perhaps he could prevent the consequences of the waiter's misstep before they escalated. There was a chance, he realized, to navigate this delicate situation carefully. To turn a potential disaster into an opportunity for insight. Shaq stepped closer, breaking Armand's concentration. "Curiosity can be dangerous," he said softly. Yet there was a hint of challenge in his tone. "But sometimes it is the only path to truth." Armand's eyes met Shaq's, and in that moment he understood this was not just a test of observation, but a test of courage and discretion. As he left the office, the photograph burned in his mind like a signal flare in darkness. He knew that the hidden safe was only the first of many secrets, and that the waiter's careless words had opened a door that could never be closed. And yet, beneath the suspense and threat, there lingered a fragile hope. Hope that understanding, patience, and respect could still shape the outcome of this dangerous puzzle. The night outside was cold and quiet. Armin's coat flapped in the wind as he walked, notebook in hand, mind racing with possibilities. Somewhere in the shadows, the first piece of a greater mystery awaited discovery, whispering that the real story had only just begun. And in the depths of the restaurant, the photograph remained, waiting for the next pair of eyes brave enough to see its full meaning. The night was quiet, almost unnervingly so, as Detective Armand Khan slipped back into the restaurant through the side entrance. The streets outside were deserted, lit only by the pale glow of streetlights reflecting on wet asphalt. Inside, the restaurant smelled faintly of oil and polished wood, familiar yet layered with secrets that seemed to hang in the air. Armand's eyes darted to the corner office where the photograph had been found. Tonight, he wasn't just an observer, he was a seeker, with the key curiosity had ignited in his chest. Armand approached the wall where the young waiter had stood in the photograph decades ago. His fingers traced the outlines of the wall, searching for what the picture had hinted at. Almost imperceptibly, he felt a subtle depression in the wood paneling a hidden compartment. His pulse quickened. The safe was real. He knelt, carefully examining the edges, and with a practiced hand, he pressed a concealed latch. The panel swung open to reveal a small but sturdy safe, its metal surface cold and unyielding. Armand's breath caught. He knew this was no ordinary storage. Whatever was inside had been protected for decades, and for good reason. He could feel the weight of its importance, the silent demand that it be treated with caution. As he reached for the combination dial, his mind wandered back to the waiter, nervous, careless, unaware. Hope stirred faintly in Armand's chest. If he could uncover the contents without triggering danger, perhaps he could prevent the young man's mistake from becoming a disaster. There was still a chance to guide events carefully, to turn what seemed like a threat into understanding. The dial clicked under his fingers, the metallic sound magnifying in the quiet room. Each number aligned with precision, a small thrill running through Armand's veins. The safe door creaked open slowly, revealing a stack of aged envelopes, photographs, and a small leather-bound notebook. The air smelled faintly of old paper, and the room seemed to pulse with stories untold. Armand picked up the notebook first. Its pages were filled with meticulous handwriting, names, dates, codes, and cryptic messages. One entry caught his eye. Respect is more than courtesy. It is survival. Teach it to those who fail to see its value. The waiter had no idea that his careless words had set a chain of events into motion that night. He went home exhausted, replaying the encounter in his mind. Unaware that a small envelope had been discreetly slipped under the door of the restaurant's back room addressed to him. Its handwriting was unfamiliar, deliberate, and chilling. The note inside read simply, "Meet me at midnight. You insulted more than a man, you insulted a legacy. Come alone, Mon." Having observed from the shadows, knew the message was no ordinary warning. It was a summons. And yet, amid the danger, a flicker of hope glimmered. This was the opportunity the waiter had been unknowingly granted, the chance to confront the consequences of his actions, and perhaps redeem himself as midnight approached. The waiter's heart pounded like a drum. The alley behind the restaurant was deserted, shrouded in fog that curled around the dim streetlights. Each step echoed in the stillness, and the envelope's message felt heavier with every heartbeat. The air was thick with anticipation, a mixture of fear and the faint promise that courage might lead to understanding. Armand followed discreetly, careful to remain unseen. His eyes caught the faint outline of the waiter approaching the back door, key in hand, the same key from the photograph's hidden safe. The waiter hesitated, glancing over his shoulder, and in that moment Armand recognized the delicate tension between dread and hope. A single decision now could shape everything that followed. The door swung open with a soft click, revealing a hidden chamber, dimly lit and lined with old photographs, documents, and maps. The walls themselves seemed to hum with history, secrets pressed into the grain of the wood. The waiter stepped inside, taking in the sheer weight of the discovery. His eyes widened as he realized the true scale of what had been hidden behind the restaurant's polite facade. And then, a voice. Calm. Measured, but unmistakably powerful. "You were warned," Big Shack said, emerging from the shadows. The man's presence filled the room, immense yet controlled, like a storm contained within a bottle. The waiter froze, his breath shallow. He hadn't expected confrontation, only instructions, only consequences. Yet in Shack's eyes he glimpsed not only authority, but also the faintest trace of opportunity. Armand's heart raced. This was the twist he had sensed, a revelation that connected the waiter to a vast legacy he had never imagined. Shack continued, "Ignorance does not excuse disrespect, but courage and honesty can still earn redemption." The words hung in the air, charged with suspense. The waiter's knees shook, yet hope whispered that this was not the end. The walls, covered with photographs, told a story of empire and secrecy, of lessons handed down through generations. The safe had been only the first step, the photograph the initial test. And the waiter, by the sheer accident of his words, had passed the first threshold into understanding the true gravity of respect and legacy. But the night had not finished its revelations. A faint sound almost imperceptibly echoed through the chamber, like footsteps in a distant hall. Shack's expression changed, his calm composure flickering just slightly. "They are closer than we think," he murmured. The waiter glanced at Armand, wide-eyed, and realized that the hope of redemption now came entangled with a new danger, one that neither he nor Armand could yet fully see. The chamber seemed to tighten around them, shadows deepening, as if the walls themselves held their breath. And in that moment, Armand understood the truth. The story was far from over. The next revelation would not just test courage, it would demand choices that could change everything. And somewhere, just beyond the dim glow of the chamber, the forces guarding Shack's secret were stirring, ready to strike. The chamber was silent, yet the air felt alive with unspoken threats. The waiter's hands trembled as he scanned the walls, lined with photographs, letters, and maps marking hidden locations across the city. Each artifact whispered secrets. Each shadow seemed to move with intent. He had thought he had merely insulted a man.
Ow!
Now he understood that he had brushed against a legacy, one meticulously protected for decades. Big Shaq's presence was overwhelming, filling the room with an invisible weight. Yet in his eyes, beneath the cold precision, lingered a trace of understanding. "Fear is natural," Shaq said softly, almost kindly, "but regret can be transformed into action." The waiter swallowed hard. Could he truly redeem himself? After such a blunder? Hope flickered faintly, fragile, but undeniable, like a candle refusing to be extinguished. Armand remained in the shadows, observing every motion, every heartbeat. He knew the waiter's moment of reckoning had arrived, and that his own role was to guide, to intervene only when necessary. The tension was electric, stretching thin between the three figures in the dim chamber. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of paper seemed amplified, like the world had narrowed to this one precarious moment. Then, without warning, a low hum echoed through the walls, a sound that did not belong. Shaq's eyes narrowed. "They are here," he said, his voice sharp, commanding. The waiter froze, terror gripping him. Who is here?" whispered. Armand stepped closer, placing a steadying hand on the waiter's shoulder. "We don't know yet," he said quietly, "but we can face it together." Shaq's gaze softened for a fleeting instant. "Understanding respect, understanding legacy can save you," he murmured. The waiter realized that these were not empty words. They were instructions, a lifeline in the face of unknown danger. His heart raced, but a strange courage began to bloom. Mistakes, he now understood, did not have to define a person. The choices did. And tonight, hope and courage were his only allies. Suddenly, the chamber door rattled. Footsteps approached, steady, deliberate, numerous. The shadows outside seemed to ripple, swallowing the dim light. Shaq's calm demeanor returned, but the tension was palpable. "They have been watching," he said, voice low, "long before your words ever reached me." The waiter's breath caught. He had walked unknowingly into a world far larger than his imagination, a world where respect was intertwined with survival, and courage was the currency of redemption. Armand's mind raced. Photographs, the maps, the safe, they were all parts of a puzzle that now demanded action. He turned to the waiter. "Listen to him. Follow instructions. Keep your fear, but don't let it control you." The waiter nodded, a fragile resolve forming amidst the storm of dread. Hope, however small, anchored him. It was enough to move, to act, to survive. Shaq approached the back wall and pressed a hidden latch. A panel slid open, revealing a narrow corridor descending into darkness. "Your first test?" Shaq said. "Walk this path. Confront the consequences of your ignorance. Learn what respect truly demands. And remember, courage paired with understanding can change the outcome." The waiter took a deep breath. The footsteps outside grew louder, closer. The shadows seemed to lean in, hungry for error, for weakness. But he stepped forward into the corridor, guided by the faint promise that redemption was still possible. Armand followed silently, aware that the night's suspense was far from over, yet heartened by the faint glow of hope that even in danger, choices could carve a path to survival. The chamber faded behind them, the photographs and letters now silent witnesses. And in the corridor, dimly lit and trembling with unseen threat, the waiter realized this was not just a test of courage, it was a test of understanding, of respect, and of the fragile hope that mistakes could still be transformed into triumph. The narrow corridor stretched ahead, its walls damp and lined with shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. The waiter's footsteps echoed, hesitant at first, then steadier as he forced himself to breathe through the fear. Step felt like walking deeper into a story not of his making, yet one he was now inseparably a part of. Armand followed silently, a steady presence behind him, while Shaq's calm guidance lingered in his mind like a map through uncertainty. Ahead, the corridor twisted sharply, revealing a small chamber illuminated by a single swinging bulb. Inside, walls were covered in charts, photographs, and clippings, connections drawn between people, places, and events spanning decades. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through the floorboards. Armin's instincts screamed. They were not alone. Suddenly, a sharp metallic click reverberated through the chamber. The waiter froze. Shadows coalesced near the far wall, darker and heavier than before, as though the very air had taken shape to block their path. A voice, chilling and unfamiliar, whispered from the darkness, "Big Shack isn't the only one in control, and your little mistake just made you targets." The waiter's heart hammered violently. He looked to Armin, eyes wide with terror. Yet within that fear, a flicker of hope remained, hope that courage, paired with understanding, could still guide them through. Shaq's words from earlier echoed in his mind. Courage paired with understanding can change the outcome. It clenched his fists, summoning the fragile courage that had carried him this far. The shadows shifted again, revealing vague forms, figures tall, deliberate, moving with purpose. The hum grew louder, almost mechanical, almost alive. Mom stepped forward, voice firm despite the tension. "Who's there? Reveal yourselves." The response was silence, punctuated only by the distant clink of metal and a faint, oppressive pressure in the room, like gravity itself had intensified. Then, a sudden movement. One figure stepped forward, tall, cloaked, and unyielding. Its face was hidden, but the presence alone radiated a